this is International Master Jesse Kraai, talking today about sending your kids off to college. The following position, the position before us, is the position a student of mine had as black. And the question I'll ask before I do anything else is, what should black play here? Stop the recording if you need to think about it. Okay, so in this position, what's characteristic is that white has more space. Okay, and this is typical. And what we could say is that pretty much white owns the first 4 rows. Okay, from A1, say, to A4, and black has 3 from the 8th rank, the 7th rank, and the 6th rank. So one way to think about this is to say that really white has, say, 4 rooms and black 3 rooms, as if they were houses. And the thing that I want to say today is that when you have more space, you don't want to trade. And when you have less space, you do want to trade. So in this case, what black would like to do is for sure take the knight on F3. Okay? And then we might get a variation, something like this. Queen takes F3, knight C6, putting pressure on D4, D5, knight E5, queen E2. And then we trade again. Knight takes, queen takes, and then maybe something like knight D7. And here white even still has a small space advantage, but it's nothing that serious. Let's go back and look at the other option. The other option here is not to take the knight and to go back. Okay, and this is the part of the problem that I see in a lot of beginner to intermediate players' games is they don't understand that when they have a cramped position, they need to exchange their pieces. And that's why I entitled this lecture, Sending Your Kids Off to College, because really, when you're in a cramped, imagine you're in a cramped household. Okay, you only have 3 rooms. And what happens is you're sharing maybe 2 kids, you got 2 kids in a bedroom and another kid in another bedroom, and then there's only 1 bathroom, and then in the morning everyone's fighting to see who can go into the bathroom, who can take a shower. People are banging on the door, they want to get in. It's a big familial mess. And that's what's going on here when black plays bishop d7, because really that's a kid, the bishop, that wants to go to college. It wants to get out of the house. Once that kid is out of the house, then there's so much more freedom in that house, both in the use of the bathroom. Now, in each of the bedrooms, we only have 1 kid. There's not fighting going on. And the kind of fighting that's happening here in this position is that all of black's pieces, or many of black's pieces, want to use the square d7 in particular. The bishop wants to be there. The knight on f6 might want to come there. The knight on b8 might want to go there. The queen might want to go there. So it's just in everyone's way, and the bishop on d7 in and of itself doesn't do all that much. So that's why I say when you're in the shack with only 3 rooms, you need to get rid of the pieces. If you're white, on the other hand, you're quite happy not to trade pieces, because your pieces have mobility. You have enough rooms in your house for your kids to move around in. You have more than 1 bathroom for there not to be a problem in the morning. Let's look at 2 more positions arising from the modern Benoni. So I'm going to look at 2 positions from the modern Benoni. And the Benoni is an opening where black gives less space, primarily because he has less pawns in the center, right here. White has an extra pawn in the center, so he has a lot more space. And the Benoni is, in Hebrew, means son of sorrow. And that generally, I think that funny name came from the fact that white had so much more space, and it was thought originally that it was very hard for black to play without that space, and that might be true. So I'm going to look at 2 variations. One is the classical variation, where white just plays simply like this. 2, knight a6, castles, knight c7, and let's try a move like a4. Now let's think about this position for a moment. White has more space, in particular in the center. And whenever you control the center, you're going to have the possibility of making black's pieces poor. Okay? So this is a very important concept. Central control, when you really think about it, really comes down to making some of your opponent's pieces bad. And that's really the most typical kind of opening advantage that the white player can get, to make some of black's pieces bad. And in this position, when we look at it, really our problem piece is, again, this bishop on c8. It needs to do something. And if we just moved it to d7, it wouldn't help us really at all. And it would really create problems, because knight c4, then we'd have this problem now with our d6 pawn. So the bishop on d7 isn't really going to work as a development square. And the rook on a8 needs the bishop to move. And this is kind of a typical Benoni idea for white. And you see it in other variations too, where this bishop on c8 really is uncomfortable. So really what black needs to think about is he needs to send this bishop off to college. So in this position, black has to find a way to solve the problem of his bishop c8. And the best way to do this is to play b6. And what he's anticipating is that white will eventually have to move the knight to c4, after which we can play bishop a6. And you can see, from white's perspective, he needs to move that knight to c4 for his bishop on c1 to be active. So even if he plays a move like f3 first, we can still make constructive moves like rook e8. We're still going to wait for him to play knight c4. Let's take a look at how this might work. Knight c4, bishop a6. And now, for example, I don't know, he can do a number of things. Say bishop f4, forcing us to take. And see, now we can play a move like queen d7. And all of a sudden we see that our pieces are much more free to move. And because of that, black has a totally acceptable game. His pieces are all doing things, and he can prepare moves like a6 and b5, expanding on the queen side where he needs to expand. So once we got rid of that problem piece, we sent that problem piece off to college, we were able to move much more freely. Let's take a look at a similar example from a game I played recently. So let's look at another Benoni position. This is from a game I played recently. And generally I should say I don't play the Benoni too much because I'm a little afraid of all the things that white can do to me. But here I was playing a player who's rated about 2200, and I knew that he hadn't had that much experience playing against the Benoni. And here, just as a side note, I thought he made a mistake, a practical mistake. If you don't know the opening that well, though he knew a little bit, you shouldn't play d5. Just play a move like e3 and you'll be safe. So he played d5, he took the challenge, and we got this down position. He played bishop f4, and I played bishop g7, and here he played a move queen a4. So let's think about what he's doing. Really what he's trying to do is, he's kind of living in the rich mansion with all that space, and he's trying to discoordinate my guys. He's trying to make use of the fact that this d7 square is a little bit funny. So, for example, I'd like to play a move like knight d7, but I can't because the bishop takes e6. So he's trying to discoordinate the family here, black's family, which has less space. So what I did was I played bishop d7, and now here he comes with his idea of queen b3. Now, this is a very interesting position. Now, if I play, say, queen c7, white can maintain an advantage by playing moves, say, like knight d2, castles, e4. The next move he'll just play bishop e2 and then castles. And notice that the bishop on d7 is just, it's kind of unpleasantly placed. In fact, a lot of the black pieces are unpleasantly placed. The bishop on d7 wouldn't like to be there because the knight on b8 would like to come. And the knight could go to a6, but then he can't even go back to c7 because the black queen is there. So in this position, black's pieces would be discoordinated. And so here I played a gambit move, but really the idea of this gambit is to send my bishop off to college. I played b5. So white has two ways he can win the pawn. If he plays bishop d6, then that's okay. I can just play queen b6. The bishop will have to move, and then I can castle. And here I have complete compensation for the pawn. I think actually black is better, because I'm way more developed, and these pawns on c5 and b4 are going to be able to harass white with moves like c4 and b4, and my knight on b8 will be able to come into the game, say knight a6 and then f4, knight c5, with very good counterplay. And all of a sudden here you see my bishop on d7 is working. And because I've gained space on the queen side, my knight on b8 can find useful ways to make itself felt on the queen side. So in the game, my opponent played knight takes b5, seeing that the other variation didn't really work. And here what happens is I'm able to get rid of my bishop, the bishop that was discoordinating my position. And so at the cost of a pawn, in this case I'm actually giving up 2 pawns, I'm going to give him up. Because now I've given him up, now my other knight gets ready to come to d7. And this is very helpful because now my rook on a8 is ready to come to b8. So black has, in a sense, just completely solved his coordination difficulties, and it's taken white some tempos to deal with that. My opponent took on d6. I played knight e4, opening up my bishop. So he comes and plays bishop e5, and I just castle. Bishop takes, king takes. Now, I have to say, first of all, that I'm not a genius for playing this, because this has actually been played many times before, at least a couple times. It's been known since the 80s, back when I used to actually play the Benoni. And this position is very interesting. It turns out that white's actually in a little bit of trouble here, despite the fact that he looks like he's doing fine. He's out of development, he's behind in development, rather, and black's pieces are finding themselves coordinated. To give you an example, I think the most critical line here would be to play queen a4, and then just to give you a sense of how things might go is we play rook b8. I'm going to try to punish white. Queen takes, queen a5 check, knight d2, rook takes pawn, rook d1, here we take another pawn, e3 has to get the bishop out, then we come rook f8, we're threatening rook to b2. And, yeah, it's not so easy. After bishop c4, and if we can just take the knight. Because now rook takes, rook b2, and probably white's best move is just to castle. And after, say, rook takes d2, I think black stands a little bit better. Nothing fantastic, but he stands a little bit better due to this activity. So, and then the real problem here is that if white plays queen d3, which is the only way to protect the rook, then black has the monstrous knight to e5. And he's going to win everything because he can take the bishop. Okay, let's go back. In the game, white played inaccurately. He played e3, and then I just played rook b8, queen a4, and I took. And here I'm basically winning. Check. Now the king has to move. Now the rook on the 7th and the king on the run, it's just not a good business. And here I found knight f6, queen c4 looks forced, and here I just took the pawn. And here I think black is lost. I'm going to put the rook, or white is lost. I'm going to play rook f to d8, and the king is going to have huge difficulties. The main point of this, however, is just to notice that really, when you have a cramped position, you have to get rid or to exchange the cramping piece. And what I like about this variation is that what black does is he says, okay, you've made these queen moves to discoordinate me, but instead of letting myself be discoordinated, I'm going to sacrifice material in order to untangle myself, and you'll still be left with this development disadvantage. So this is International Master Jesse Kraai reminding you that when you're living in cramped quarters, you want to send your kids off to college so your house has more space. Bye-bye.